June 25th, 1876, the date of the Little Bighorn engagement. This instant endures as a monument to courage and to the obscure corners of our past that continue to perplex. Yet imagine if you could travel back and observe everything happen from the perspective of one who was present. The testimony of George B. Herondine is not simply a memory, it is an opening into the very core of Custer's last charge. Ready yourself to experience the unvarnished reality, the profound feelings, and the indelible story of a conflict that changed America's destiny. Relax, inhale deeply, and allow us to travel as one through this gripping account. While viewing, remember to press like and subscribe to our channel. We are creating a fellowship of those who pursue truth and adore history, and your encouragement is everything. Considerable falsehood regarding the Little Bighorn fight has spread through the Herald and other publications, with numerous reports twisted to confuse the people. I remained with Reno for the whole episode, observing proceedings prior to and following the engagement. I did not witness everything, but I will relate what I observed precisely as it occurred. My part commenced with General Gibbon's force at the mouth of the Rosebud, where Generals Terry and Custer united with our column. General Terry gave me leave to ride with Custer along the Rosebud. I recall speaking with Terry in General Gibbon's tent, and afterwards upon the steamer Far West, which was moored at the Rosebud's mouth. Terry inquired about the landscape around the upper Rosebud and Tulloch's Fork. I was on the deck when called to a war council within, where Generals Terry, Gibbon, Custer, and Brisbane were planning. Terry presented a map, seeking my understanding of the country by Tulloch's Fork and the Little Horn. The discussion made evident that Terry was determining where the columns of Custer and Gibbon should meet. Custer advancing up the Rosebud and Gibbon, moving alongside the Bighorn. Having traveled that ground previously, I provided my knowledge. Custer appeared satisfied with my details and desired my company. Subsequently, General Gibbon came to me, verifying my attachment to Custer's command. We spoke shortly concerning my duty as a scout, and the payment agreed, which was settled on June 21st, just before General Gibbon departed the vessel. That same day, General Brisbane came out from the cabin, and I questioned where his cavalry might be located in the following days so I could locate them. He indicated they would likely be close to the mouth of the Little Bighorn. At midday on June 21st, I presented myself to General Custer and was placed under Lieutenant Varnum, who led the party of scouts. It was then I encountered Mish Boyer, a mixed-blood scout and guide serving with Varnum. We commenced our movement on the 22nd around midday, progressing up the Rosebud. At the front were Boyer and the scout Bloody Knife, directly followed by Custer. Lieutenant Varnum and his scouts came next, positioned just before the primary column. We marched approximately 12 miles before establishing camp at 5 in the evening. General Custer ordered reveille at 4 in the morning, directing the command to be prepared to move at 5 a.m. on the 23rd. We set off precisely at that hour, tracing the stream for 4 or 5 miles until we came upon an Indian trail previously discovered by Reno's detachment. We pursued this trail until 5 p.m., then camped for the night. That evening, Custer dispatched the Crow Scouts forward to reconnoiter. At 5 a.m. on the 24th, we broke camp and proceeded along the trail. Shortly after, Custer, who was ahead with Boyer, summoned me. He indicated he might send me and Charlie Reynolds ahead to scout Tulloch's Fork. I proposed it was premature, as we were still advancing toward Tulloch, and I could only track the existing trail. I asked Boyer to concur, and he did, explaining that higher up the Rosebud, a crossing would allow us to cut over to Tulloch in a ride of about 15 miles. Custer answered, "Very well, I can wait." We had not progressed much farther when the Crow Scouts returned, reporting the trail ahead was freshening and they had discovered new pony tracks. They also carried the scalp of a white man, later recognized as belonging to Stoker, a soldier of Company H, 2nd Cavalry, slain days earlier at the Rosebud's mouth. Hearing this, Custer stopped the command, had the men dismount, and assembled the officers for a conference. Though I was too distant to hear particulars, after a short pause we continued our deliberate advance. We soon arrived at Muddy Creek, site of a skirmish between the 2nd Cavalry and Lame Deer's band the prior spring. While crossing, I observed some lodge trails had diverged from the main path up Muddy Creek. I followed briefly, then reported to Custer. He instantly halted the column and ordered Lieutenant Varnum to examine the deviation. Custer wished to lose no lodges and demanded notification if any separated. While Varnum was gone, we paused and the men cooked supper. Varnum returned 2 hours later, stating the muddy trail converged with the main trail farther on. We then continued our march, following a trail growing steadily fresher. We passed multiple old camps, suggesting the Indians were moving leisurely while seeking pasture. As daylight faded, Custer posted flankers and maintained vigilant watch to prevent any lodges from slipping away. His objective was to seize the entire village without allowing escapees. At twilight, we camped directly on the now very fresh trail. The general sent Varnum, Boyer, and several scouts forward to examine the trail and surrounding country. The men were directed to graze their mounts, eat supper, and be ready to march at 11 p.m. All rested until 10 p.m., then packed and moved out. The night was profoundly dark and progress was tedious. After roughly 10 miles, we halted at 2 a.m., unsaddled the horses, and let both men and animals rest. The scouts returned overnight, informing Custer they had found the Indian encampment. We packed and advanced at dawn. Mitch, Boyer, and Reynolds, who had been scouting, reported the camp was immense. Boyer observed it was the largest gathering he had ever seen, and Reynolds concurred, noting the tremendous numbers. Custer asserted with confidence, "I can defeat them." However, Reynolds cautioned it would require 6 hours of severe combat to prevail. On the morning of June 25th, the last day of our advance, Custer halted the troops and concealed them as possible. He then took an orderly and rode about 4 miles up to the divide, where Lieutenant Varnum and Boyer were posted, hoping to glimpse the village in the Little Bighorn Valley beyond. While Custer was absent, I followed the trail up a dry fork of the Rosebud, but had not gone far when I sighted 2 figures crossing the hills toward the Little Horn. Custer was gone for about 90 minutes. Upon his return, Boyer asked if I had seen the Indians. I answered I had seen what appeared to be Indians. Boyer exclaimed, "You were within 150 yards of them, and you surprised them." They fled back to camp as fast as possible. Custer sounded officers' call, delivered orders, and divided the column into battalions. Once orders were given, we advanced up the divide at a quick pace, covering 3 or 4 miles to the summit. The scouts, under Lieutenants Varnum and Hare, then pushed ahead at a gallop, with the command following at a trot. I rode with the scouts as we followed a creek descending toward the Little Bighorn. Nearing its mouth, we saw a solitary lodge on the bank. We ascended a hill to flank and overlook the lodge, finding it empty. From the hilltop, we observed a great dust cloud and fleeing herds down by the Little Bighorn. We also saw a few Indians on the hills, riding rapidly and apparently escaping. I called out that the Indians were getting away and urged we must hurry our chase or risk losing them. Lieutenant Hare swiftly wrote a note to Custer. I do not know its full content, but believe he conveyed our concern that the Indians were fleeing. Custer was nearby, riding at a rapid trot. The scouts hurried down to the deserted lodge, cut it open, and discovered a deceased warrior inside. Custer arrived just as we were examining the lodge, with Colonel Reno leading the vanguard of the advance. I overheard Custer directing Reno, "Reno, take the scouts and lead the advance. I will follow directly behind you." Reno spurred his horse into a fast gallop, shouting for his men to manage their mounts. My own horse faltered, causing a brief delay, but I quickly rejoined Reno at the front. As we forded the river, the Crow scouts shouted to one another in their tongue, "The Sioux are coming!" Understanding their words, I alerted Reno, "The Sioux are approaching." Reno paused briefly, allowing the command to tighten its formation before we crossed the Little Bighorn and deployed into a battle line on the plain just past the timber. The maneuver was executed smoothly and without interruption, shifting from a trot to a gallop. As we proceeded, it grew apparent that a substantial force of warriors awaited our charge. We advanced roughly half a mile, with the Indians setting fires in the timber on our right flank and directly ahead. A few were situated within the woods, and we fired upon them, though they did not immediately return fire. Soon after, we dismounted and formed a skirmish line facing the hills. The line extended to the left and forward, and firing commenced almost at once, with the Indians located near the base of the hills in the shallow valley. The exchange of gunfire grew heavier as the warriors tried to outflank us. Our horses were taken into the timber on our right and rear, while the soldiers fell back to seek shelter among the brush and smaller trees. Inside the timber, we located a small clearing where the command reorganized and remounted. I was among the last to reach the timber and stopped to fire at several Indians who had penetrated from the left and rear. Once I joined the command in the clearing, we experienced a short pause before a sudden volley rang out from the brush. Bloody Knife, positioned directly before me, with Reno to my left, were both hit. The volley killed Bloody Knife outright, and one soldier cried out, "Oh my God, I've been hit!" Reno ordered us to dismount, only to reverse the order moments later, commanding us to remount. However, not everyone had managed to mount when Reno led a charge out of the timber onto the open plain. The men broke into a disorganized scramble, each trying to quit the woods as fast as possible, running at an angle toward the Little Bighorn River. I followed the command out of the timber, with roughly half the men ahead of me and the remainder behind. The dust was so dense it became impossible to see our direction. Just as I broke onto the prairie, my horse stumbled and fell, then bolted and disappeared into the brush. As I turned back, I heard an officer shout, "Halt! Men! Halt! Let's make a stand and fight them." As soon as Reno's troops emerged from the timber, the Indians rapidly closed in, assaulting from every direction. After my horse threw me, I returned to the timber and met Lieutenant DeRudio, stopping to speak with him. As we talked, we began defending ourselves against the attacking warriors. Others quickly joined us, and we secured our horses to the trees. Just as we had settled into this defensive posture, heavy firing erupted downriver, signaling that Custer's forces had engaged the enemy. We observed a great many Indians breaking off their assault on Reno's troops and racing down the valley at full speed. I heard the sound of intense gunfire in the distance. This heavy firing persisted for approximately 3/4 of an hour to an hour before it gradually diminished into silence. I turned to the men with me and stated, "Boys, I believe we should move from here." I pointed out that the fighting below had stopped, and while the result was unclear, I feared the Indians had prevailed. There were 5 warriors situated between our position and Major Reno's. From approximately a mile off, we observed Reno's command halted upon a hill. I rejoined Reno at 5 o'clock in the evening. After we came out from the timber, we witnessed great numbers of Indians moving up the valley. As I climbed the hill, Reno's forces began advancing in the direction Custer had gone, but they were swiftly driven back by the warriors and compelled to return to their position, where they remained until dark. The following day, June 26th, the fighting recommenced at daybreak and persisted until 4:01 p.m. The men endured severe thirst, and as many as 7 were wounded while trying to fetch water. I am of the opinion that Captain Benteen saved the engagement on the hill. None among us knew with any certainty what had happened to General Custer until General Terry arrived with Gibbon's column on the morning of June 27th. The force Custer faced on June 25th likely numbered no more than 200 warriors. I do not believe any of our men were killed before Reno's retreat into the timber, and only 1 man fell during the break for the bluffs. Contrary to other accounts, the horses were not spent, and the men were neither worn out nor drowsy when we reached the battlefield. On the contrary, the animals were fresh, and Custer led a body of eager men toward the sound of firing. Our sole worry was that the enemy might slip away before we could attack them. I do not believe Custer's own engagement continued for a great length of time. It was probably concluded in under 2 hours. However, at one stage, the fierceness of the gunfire made us think Custer was pushing forward, and the Indians themselves appeared uncertain of the battle's result. They started taking down their lodges. The distance from the mouth of the Rosebud, where Custer began his march, to the battlefield at the Little Bighorn spanned over 100 miles. Our daily progress was as follows: 12 miles on the first day, 35 miles on the second, 33 miles on the third, and between 25 and 28 miles on the fourth and final day. We left at noon on June 22nd and arrived at the battlefield around noon on June 25th. Contrary to widespread reports, Custer did not drive his men and horses by pushing them excessively. In fact, a heavily burdened pack train maintained pace with us the entire way. From my observation, Custer's conduct throughout the march was careful, systematic, and demonstrated exemplary military bearing in every regard. I trust this eyewitness testimony provides a clearer viewpoint on the Battle of the Little Bighorn in the Great Sioux War of 1876. History is often a puzzle where the final pieces are missing. Having just walked in Herondine's boots, what question about Little Bighorn burns brightest for you now? Share it in the comments. We read everyone. For more journeys that challenge the textbook narrative, hit like and subscribe.